This is the Gwent Police and Crime Panel, which is being held in the chamber of the County Hall at Usk. And can I welcome you all? Can we, I think, do we want to, yeah, could you all introduce yourselves before we start so that people watching, any new watchers know who everyone is?
Julian Williams, Chief Constable, Gwent Police. Morning.
Sean Curley, Commissioner's Chief Executive.
Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Darren Goward-Pask, Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you very much for that. If the councillors could start by...
Councillor Jez Kirby, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Colin Mann, Caerphilly County Borough.
Councillor Stuart Healy, Blaina Gwent.
Mike Jeremiah.
Lisa Winner, Blaina Gwent Council.
William Routley, Newport City Council.
Emma Rapier, Torvine County Borough Council.
Councillor John Guy, Newport City Council Chairman.
Catherine Forbes-Thompson, Lead Officer to the panel.
Jill Howells, Independent Member and Vice Chair.
Peter Nuttall, Independent Member.
County Councillor Peter Clark for Monmouthshire.
Thank you very much for that. If we now move on to the agenda, declarations of interest.
Chair, I wonder if I may, I've got 3 new members of my management staff, which I brought along to meet the panel. Do you think you could ask them to introduce themselves with their titles, please?
Yes, my apologies if you would do that, please.
Joanne Regan, Head of Assurance and Compliance.
Roger Guest, Head of Communications and Engagement.
Joanna Robinson, Head of Strategy.
Right, can I say it's nice to see some professionals standing at the back there, to sit in at the back, not standing at the back. Right, if we can move on, I just want to mention that the Police Commissioner has to leave at 12:30.
We have to, both the Chief and I have to be, we're on our way to Belfast. And we'll have to be on the road by 12:30. So, right. Yeah, that's our absolute deadline.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving on to the agenda, declaration of interest. Those have already been recorded in the past. Has anyone got anything new? No? Apologies for absence, number 2.
A list has been passed around, Chair.
Okay, if we move on to the minutes. Quickly going through the minutes. Everyone has obviously read all their papers, but just quickly going through the minutes as to accuracy, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone in agreement that they had a true record? And any matters arising? No? Okay.
Yep. If I may, yep. Chair, and sorry, a bit of an accident here with the water jug. I'm not trying to pour cold water all over the papers. But yes, if I could, item 5 on page 2, to remind members about the invitation to observe the Joint Audit Committee as one of the key vehicles for holding the Chief and myself to account. And Darren indeed has the dates of those meetings, if you wish to have that.
Just to confirm, they have been circulated previously, but just to remind members, we have the next meeting on the 13th of December. Then moving into next year, 4th of March, 30th of May, and the 29th of July is a additional meeting to consider the statements of accounts. So members are welcome to attend and see the Joint Audit Committee in action.
Can we pass around details, the time and place and so on?
Can I say that I noted the next one, and I've said that I'll attend. Yeah. Okay, and can everyone else make sure that they keep themselves updated at these times, and make sure that you tell everyone if you want to attend. And thanks very much for the offer.
Then, if I may, under item 6, the fourth paragraph, priority 2, just to say that the Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking Conference that we were planning to arrange this October isn't taking place because of a clash with a number of other and related events, which I'll allude to shortly, but we do intend to reorganise a conference probably in the early new year.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Obviously, a very, very important subject, which I realise that that everything has been done to cover that particular subject. Right, if we now move on to the item 4, Police and Crime Commissioners for Gwent update, September 2018, that's pages 7 to 22.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will just highlight, and my colleagues, will highlight some of the issues that are written here. Once that's over, obviously, we will take questions on any item that you, or indeed anything that you think may be missing. In terms of 1.1, with your permission, I will ask my deputy to comment on where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair. There is significant progress being made on the work on adverse childhood experiences under the auspices of the Police Transformation Fund work that's funded by the Home Office and policing across across England and Wales. The work in Wales is being led by a national team, and we have a Gwent regional team based led by Superintendent Mike Richards, and all our posts have been filled and are working constructively in terms of delivering the work. I think it's fair to say that we've set up a scrutiny board to support the work in Gwent, and we have representation from all of the local authority education departments. Our thematic lead in Gwent is work on adverse childhood experiences in education in particular, and we see this as an opportunity for us to consider how policing and education services can work more constructively, or work to achieve greater impact in supporting children with adverse childhood experiences. Happy to share any further information with members, and again, if people would like to meet the ACES team in Gwent Police, then happy to arrange and facilitate that.
Thank you. If I may then move to 1.3 and 1.4, just to remind people that there will be Hate Crime Awareness Week later on next month. And we have been provided with £5,000 from the Welsh Government to assist in that work. Hate crime awareness, as you will see from the bullet points there, isn't just about race and gender issues and religion. It's also about disability, and I've been lobbied quite a bit by representatives of disabled groups to make sure that some of the hate crime experiences that they have, that we're made aware of it, and that we alter any procedures that we may have in terms of helping to act against it. And as you can see from 1.4, we're also working with the Welsh Refugee Council on hate crime awareness, and indeed from my partnership fund we have provided them with some monies to enable them to continue with their work. If I may then move on to 2.2, the Keep Safe scheme. We're doing a lot of work with the People First groups within Gwent. These are groups that particularly work with people who have significant learning difficulties and face quite a few problems in life. And this is very much about, as the title suggests, how the police can work with them in particular and other key partners to make sure that they're not taken advantage of in terms of mate crime and issues that I have alluded to previously. Then, if I may move on to 2.4 and 2.5, review of sexual abuse, violence and exploitation services and restorative justice, and I'll again ask my deputy to comment on that work.
Apologies. So the review of our sexual abuse services that are commissioned by the Commissioner has been completed. It is being shared with the VAUDA, the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Board, on the 9th of October. And we are currently in the position of taking forward work to recommission or to commission our services to ensure that we provide a strong service to victims of sexual abuse in in Gwent. In terms of restorative justice, as we've reported previously to the panel, that we have a newly appointed restorative justice coordinator, Mrs. Julie James, who's based in Connect Gwent in the Victims Service for Gwent Police, and she is currently working with partners to determine how we can best support victims and offenders through a restorative justice process.
Thank you very much. If I may then move on to 3.2, Black History Month event. This is happening on the 15th of October, jointly between my office and Race Council Cymru. We are sponsoring this event in Newport. I would encourage members of this panel to attend it if they possibly can, to show their support for the events that are described here. And the fact that we are supporting this particular event is one of the reasons why we've decided to postpone the hate crime and human trafficking event until later on in the new year, so that it can not be overshadowed by numbers of other events that are going on. In terms of 3.3, just to give you a little update, that fund is being developed. There are fresh rounds of bids coming in, and we're looking, as I've said before, to very much work with some of the most disadvantaged areas within Gwent, and to support projects that can help to keep young people out of the criminal justice system by arranging significant diversionary activities. And indeed, HTV in December are going to show a documentary on the work of the Proceeds of Crime Fund in terms of supporting that type of activity. And I was interviewed at the Rascal Boxing Club. You know, don't take too much from the name, but that's in Newport East, where we have provided funding of just under £10,000 for equipment and coaches to work with local young people, as the title suggests, to learn boxing skills, but also, of course, it's not just about boxing, it's about teamwork, it's about keeping fit, it's very much about self-awareness and personal prestige. So we're keeping a close eye on projects like this, and we'll work with a range of people to try and make sure that the money gained from criminals is put to good use. If I may then move on to 5.8, which is the Welsh language standards. We will be having a full update later on, but I'll ask my Chief Executive if there's any comments she'd like to make at this stage.
I'm happy if we take it later on the agenda, unless you've got any questions now.
Okay. No. All right, we'll come back there. Then if we go on beyond to the key achievements, number 9, the comprehensive spending review. I want to bring this to your attention because it does certainly impact a lot on my time and the work that I'm doing. The comprehensive spending review, which will be formally underway at the beginning of next year, and there's a lot of preparatory work being done now. I'm one of the 4 police and crime commissioners from England and Wales that is a member of the senior steering group of the Home Office that is looking at its funding bid for law enforcement, which is predominantly police, but there are other agencies involved as well. And it is certainly a very, very important piece of work. I'm very pleased to be involved doing it, because it will really determine the level of resources that policing across England and Wales will have from the next year onwards. And the importance of that, I'm sure, is self-evident. Also, I have the distinct responsibility as the only representative from Wales on that body. So I have to represent the needs of the 4 Welsh police forces and the offices of police and crime commissioners, as well as making sure that the interest of key partners, because bids are to be coordinated with other key public services like health, education, the Ministry of Justice, etc., and with the exception of the Ministry of Justice, all the other key partners that Whitehall offices will be dealing with in terms of English bids are, of course, devolved to the Welsh Government. I made that point very forcefully. The Home Office have acknowledged it, and they have now begun to involve the Welsh Government within those discussions. But I'm the only one who is on that senior steering group that is able to make sure that those issues are properly understood and allowed for. And number 10, apprenticeship levy. As we've written there, those discussions are continuing. They're not resolved. We've got, and the Chief may want to refer to this later, we have certainly a good breathing space in that there is now an acknowledgement, both at Cardiff Bay and in Westminster, that this matter has to be resolved. And I know at the previous meeting you undertook to write to the Home Secretary along these lines. I did urge, or at least we came back for some caution because of developments then that we heard about. And as I've written there, this is the 4 Welsh forces combined. We have a £600,000 grant from the Home Office, which is coupled with a £500,000 grant from the Welsh Government, and bear in mind that policing is not devolved, so that's a voluntary contribution from the Welsh Government, which does enable us to make progress with higher education. And that's very important because the higher education role will be a key aspect, particularly of the graduate apprenticeship approach to the police education and qualification framework. So we're pleased that we've got that, but a lot more work needs to be underway to make sure that for further years we're on a proper, sound financial footing, the same as our colleagues in England will be. Item 11, the All Wales Policing Group. I'm chair of the All Wales Policing Group this year, which means that when we meet every quarter, that's the 4 Welsh police forces and the 4 offices of Police and Crime Commissioner, we consider the issues that impact upon us in Wales. And you will note from this, we've taken matters forward. Whereas we used to have sort of quarterly or 4 monthly meetings with Welsh Government ministers, that was a little bit of an ad hoc arrangement, and it was not as effective as we'd really hope it would be. So we've now gone further than that, and we've got the agreement of the Welsh Government to hold regular quarterly police board meetings, which will be chaired by the First Minister or his nominee, and it is a he at this moment, and that nominee is Alan Davis, who's currently the Local Government and Communities Cabinet Secretary, Local Government and, thinking back to my own time then, Local Government and Public Services Cabinet Secretary. The first meeting of that board will be in November. We are holding pre-meetings with the Cabinet Secretary and his colleagues to agree the initial agenda, the scope of the meetings and the terms of reference. As I'm the chair of the All Wales Policing Group, that falls to me predominantly, and it's also linked, of course, to my work on the Home Office Senior Steering Group for the Comprehensive Spending Review. If I could just go on to item 12, and I'm sure that the Chief, when he gives his report as well, will allude to this. We were very pleased to hold Sir Tom Windsor, who's the Chief Inspector of Police, on the 2nd of August. We talked about the arrangements in Wales, particularly to make sure he understood the issue of partnership working with the devolved public services. He, in his turn, went further to explain how he saw the force management statements working in the future. And these are the new way in which there'll be sort of self-appraisal by the police forces to contribute towards inspection regimes. All this is happening at the same time as we're undergoing quite important reappraisals and reviews of the way in which we provide reports to yourself, and indeed the scrutiny arrangements between the Chief Constable and my office. But that work is getting well underway, and I'm sure the Chief may well want to update us a little bit further on that matter. On item 13, the funding opportunities, Home Office Early Intervention Fund, and perhaps Larry could comment a little bit further on where we are at.
In terms of the home,
yes.
So we have undertaken 2 funding proposals with our 4 three other PCCs across Wales in relation to both the children affected by domestic abuse fund and the early intervention youth fund. So they're collaboration bids for all four forces that are looking at to, in particular, support children affected by domestic abuse and also young people who are at risk of being engaged in serious violence.
Thank you for that. I'm almost finished, Chair, you'll be pleased to hear. In terms of number 14, here we are, we're gluttons for punishment. We've explained about the formal relationships that we're now going to have in terms of policing with the Welsh Government. Separately from that, there's been a feeling that we need greater engagement with Assembly members, separately from the arrangements with the Welsh Government, and we have formed, under the auspices of John Griffiths, AM, one of the Newport Assembly members, an all-party group on policing, which will meet every term, and the first meeting took place last term. It was very well attended indeed, both from the policing side. All four forces and PCC officers were represented, and a lot of Assembly members were present, including the presiding officer and the deputy presiding officer, to put questions about policing policy, how a non-devolved service worked with the devolved services, and an understanding of some of the pressures that are on policing. That responsibility also falls to me from our side, as I am the chair of the All Wales Policing Group up until June of next year. Under key priorities, you'll see there things going forward. What isn't written there, but I will remind you of, is that I'm going to commission a review of the current police and crime plan. And we hope to have the new plan in place by April of next year. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't think the current plan adequately addresses the impact of serious and organised crime on individuals and communities within Gwent. If we think about issues like county lines, the impact of human trafficking, whilst it is referred to in the plan, I don't think it's adequately reflected, and we need to correct that, in my view, to make sure that the plan does cover local priorities, clearly such as the need for crime prevention, supporting victims. Of course, those things will still be there, but we need, I think, to beef up the issue on the impact of serious and organised crime, and that will be reflected within the new plan. I'll also be taking the opportunity, for reasons that members will understand, to make sure that where we describe outcomes, they are properly accessible. Some of them are a little vague, difficult to generate meaningful evidence. I want to correct that, and I think this is the right opportunity to do that. And the very final point from me is I've been attending, I'm very pleased to say, together with others here, especially the Chief, quite a lot of passing out parades for new police officers of late. 2 weeks ago, we had, I think it was 40 new officers, so many that we had to split it in two. In terms of greeting them and their family and friends and congratulating them. Those aren't net gains, I must stress, because every year 50 to 60 police officers will retire or leave the service through normal means. But we are now in a position where we have 150 more officers in post than we did in 2015. And that will be reflected through the neighbourhood policing teams. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is because it's still the case that the main public message that comes back to us is the need for visible presence, more bobbies on the beat. We know it's a bit more than that in terms of dealing with crime, but it is clearly in terms of providing reassurance for people, it is important. And that's why we've taken that decision to concentrate to the best of our ability within resources on the recruitment of more officers. And indeed, I believe we're up in the top one or top two in terms of recruitment across England and Wales, certainly well ahead of the rest of Wales. I'll leave it there, Chair, and we will endeavour to take questions. And I may, with your permission, also at times, depending on the questions, call in my 3 new management staff to contribute.
Commissioner, we sit here to scrutinise and also support you. Just wondering, there's real jigsaw out there in respect of people that you have to deal with. I just wondering, are they all sort of really being helpful and professional in all sorts of ways? You know, there's a lot of dealings you have with all sorts of other organisations. Are they all playing their part? Because, you know, everyone's in this together, aren't they, really?
We are in it all together. Sorry. We are all in this together. We often use the expression, the police cannot be responsible for policing alone. It's a partnership matter with key formal partners, and indeed down to the level of citizens providing us with intelligence. I think it's probably better answered really by the Chief, but my view, and certainly through the statutory public service boards, which I see as a principal formal vehicle for all of this, is that we are getting well understood and there is a genuine collaborative approach to dealing with the matters that affect all of us.
I think I can deal with that question quite simply. I think police officers, police staff deal with a lot of things they shouldn't be dealing with. In summary, you look at mental health, you look at shortages in other services, because they're true 24-hour, 365 days a year emergency services. As the ambulances are, we pick up a huge amount of stuff we shouldn't do. Get a lot of criticism for a number of society's ills. Unfortunately, that's historical anyway. But do we get a lot of help from other people? I think we've got good partnership arrangements, Mr. Guy. But I think we pick up a lot that we shouldn't do.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions from members, please?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Cover. Right, I'm sorry. I'm Councillor Tony Easton, Monmouthshire County Councillor. It's regarding your priorities for the next quarter in delivering the estate strategy. You are disposing of the estate within Abergavenny next, if it's already gone, maybe gone, I'm not sure. How are you going to provide the Chief Constable with the appropriate estate so he can carry out his responsibilities of policing in the northwest of Monmouthshire? Because I understand that there will be no estate from which the Chief Constable can operate other than Monmouth.
Well, you're quite right to allude to the estate strategy, where we're moving towards what we call a hub and spoke model. Again, the Chief may well want to comment in operational terms. But let me say, you are quite right. The Abergavenny station has been sold. There will be a presence in the town centre, and we are working with Fire and Rescue in particular to establish premises jointly with, you'll know where the fire station is in Abergavenny, to have shared premises there. There's a whole range of reasons. And we'll have to look at this in terms of right across the borough. The Abergavenny station, far bigger than is needed for modern policing. I've given a public commitment, and I'll reiterate that now. We are not withdrawing from any communities, but the nature of the provision might alter somewhat. Can I invite the Chief if he wants to comment further?
Yes, Commissioner, thank you. We're working closely with the Commissioner on the estate provisions in the short, medium and long term. The overall leader of neighbourhood policing, Chief Superintendent Mark Budden, is involved with that, as is Ian Roberts, Superintendent Ian Roberts, who covers your area. And I think the example of Abertillery, the tri-service station, is hopefully the way forward. We think the fire service, ambulance service and ourselves have got a great deal to offer each other in various skills, and I think are coming together and are working, if not in the least the sharing of intelligence, coming together is a much better way forward.
There is a concern, Mr. Cuthbert, that the residents in the northwest of the area around Lethe Hill and Clydach and Gilwern may not be able to be serviced by the Chief Constable in an appropriate and a full manner, and they feel that their resources will be diminished because of the lack of the resource you're going to keep within the Abergavenny area.
Well, thanks. I'm going to bring in my deputy, if I may, Chair. Can I say I'm aware of those concerns because I've had communication on it, and we've sought to provide reassurance. And very soon, once we've got good clarity on the arrangements that we're going to have. We will be making it clear in terms of communications for people to be reassured.
Yes, certainly. So the first part of the estate strategy that is being implemented is, as you say, the North Monmouthshire aspect, which has been brought particularly to the forefront because, as you mentioned, in relation to the sale of the Abergavenny current police station, we have a transition plan to help us over the next year. But the outcome will be that there will be a joint facility that Gwent Police will be working with Monmouthshire County Council and other partners in the centre of Abergavenny, which will then have Abergavenny Town Centre, which will have police presence within the facility, as well as the adaptation and the amalgamation of our policing service with the fire service just outside the town centre in Abergavenny Fire Station, so that there will be a full police presence in Abergavenny Fire Station, as well as police presence in the facility in the middle of town. Whilst that interim transition is taking place, there will be provision for officers to be located at Abergavenny Fire Station during the period of the build and the transition. And it's very clear that whilst that the provision in both Abergavenny and Monmouth, as we move to change the nature of the estate, will be maintained. We have worked very closely with Chief Superintendent Budden and Superintendent Roberts in order to stress the importance of engaging with the local community representatives, and we will continue to, we have an estate strategy board next week that both the Commissioner and the Chief will be present at, and we will reaffirm the points that you're making in that meeting.
So you're confident that you could provide the Chief Constable with the resources at his disposal then?
Yes, I am confident.
Can I say that a lot of our questions will come under the performance, after the performance management presentation. So unless there's anything burning issue other than what I've just said, we'll now move on to that. Oh.
I got one question. In your presentation, Police Commissioner, you mentioned the number of police has increased 100 and something or other. Yeah. What's the average number of years experience of Gwent Police now compared to 2015?
I can answer that, no problem. I think you've got to take those figures in context as well. I don't know if anyone remembers the December presentation I gave, but in Wales we lost more officers than any other force. So we've increased more than anyone else, but we've lost more than everyone else. We went down from 1,450 to 1,150. No, Darren will know we're up to 1,279 now. So we have got the greatest percentage increase. That's a massive bonus for us. I'm really grateful for the support of the Commissioner in that. And we've taken on since 2016 an extra 385 officers. Where that leaves us is we have 30% of our officers now have got under 3 years service. Now, that's got positive and negatives, of course. When I go out and speak to those young officers, they're massively enthusiastic. There's a huge age range. So if you look at the degree apprenticeship sort of stuff and what the professionalisation of police and workforce transformation is all about, it's about moving about different careers, perhaps not perfect, but I think it brings that sort of element. They're really IT literate. They understand the cyber offences. Not that our older officers don't understand that, but they get hands-on straight away. They're really afraid with a record management system niche. Of course, they haven't got the significant amount of experience that other people may have, but they do add a huge amount of value. And often in policing, I think, with morale, certainly with the violent aspect, strength in numbers. So if you book on, for example, in Maindy or Alway, or if you book on in Monmouth and you don't see anyone, if you book on and there's 3 people next to you, you're certainly more motivated, you certainly feel safer, and you certainly provide a better service to the public. So I think that the amount of officers is absolutely fantastic. I think in 2 or 3 years we'll be better off again because they'll have greater experience. At this moment, this was always going to happen. I don't know if that explains that. Okay, thank you.
I think in addition, I think the Chief Constable and the PCC do engage with all the new recruits, and we're very pleased that so many of you are present at passing out parades and engage with those new recruits. I think one of the things that's really telling, though, when we go and first meet the new intake is that on average, in talking to the incoming class, usually we ask what sort of experience have people got, and inevitably I would say at least a third, if not more, are actually coming into policing with a wealth of experience from other business areas, and usually about a third are coming from our other public service partners, so probation, prison services, the NHS. And so I think there's a real balance of new enthusiasm coming in with the cohort, but also a significant amount of people who are coming in with long-standing life experience and professional practice.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, I think we've seen if you go to the larger metropolitan forces, if you go to the Met Police, if you go to the West Mids, if you go to Manchester, if you go to Merseyside, because of the types of offences they're dealing with, because of the volume they deal with, they have to take on many more serious offences early on. I think our staff are experiencing that now. Again, that's positive. In some respects, they get to see certain aspects a lot quicker, but it's negative because some of the foundations and building blocks they may miss out on. But we're reliant on our sergeants to do that. We've just increased the number of sergeants around the force by 7. We've gone over established, we've been supported by the Commissioner, and part of the underspend we had this year, we wanted that to go towards supervisory ranks. We've had good feedback from the sergeants all around the force in that this extra cohort will allow them to become more visible and support the more junior officers. But I think it's certainly, especially, and you're welcome again, I know you come to the passing out, go to Vantage Point, there's a huge buzz there, there's a huge amount of excitement, the force is alive. When you don't bring in new blood, there's certainly that stagnant sort of element. You've just got more experienced people who only know one way of doing things, the Gwent way, and you bring other people in. And of course we've had transferees, which is great as well. I think we've had about 20 transferees. We haven't done that for about 7 years, which I can't understand. We brought people who couldn't apply to Gwent Police at that time, who come back to this area. They're very loyal to Gwent, and they've got a different style of policing, which I think will hopefully make us a bit better. And if you can do that in public protection in the future, it'll be really, really good. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, I'm very pleased to hear about the backbone of the police, the sergeants, because they have their experience and they can speak to the constables and advise them when necessary. Good.
Chair, it's 1.2, the diversion schemes mentioned in the Women's Pathfinder diversion scheme. There is a mention elsewhere in the agenda of a substantial number of people who have been kept out of prison by this scheme, and I think I'm reading from this particular point that it is being developed and it's looking at yet more ways of actually achieving this. I think the more people you can keep out of the prison, the better. I think most people would agree. So I don't know whether you can put any more flesh on the bones of that one.
I'll let the Deputy comment on that, but you are, of course, right, especially with younger people and, depending on the nature of the offences, naturally, but if we can keep, as a general rule, people out of the criminal justice system, clearly it's something we want to do.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm really pleased that you've drawn attention to the developments of the diversion scheme. We are about to go and commission the Women's Pathfinder scheme. So we are launching to a tender process on Monday for both the Women's Pathfinder, which is very much looking at diverting women out of the criminal justice system, but also we will be going to market to, and I know this has been an area of interest for the panel, for diversion for people aged between 18 to 25 of all genders, so men and women. I was very fortunate yesterday to spend the afternoon with our Wisdom colleagues, which is our integrated offender management team, working very, very closely between the National Probation Service and Gwent Police. very much looking at how we can try and ensure that we manage our offenders to limit the reoffending rates. But also, I think very critically, is where we are able to divert people from the criminal justice system, that has immense benefits. But at the same time, I can provide reassurance to the panel that there was a real commitment that those people who would be best served to be within the criminal justice system and be within prison and benefit from the programs that people get in prison are obviously receiving custodial sentences and the treatment that they require in the secure estate.
We so often hear that people do not benefit from being in prison. In fact, the very opposite.
If I could quickly, I know you're anxious to move on, Chair, but I think it's an important issue. The Ministry of Justice, clearly, and indeed the Home Office, as you'll be aware, are bringing in significant changes in England in terms of the probation service and the role of the community rehabilitation companies. They've recognised in Wales that in terms of dealing with reoffending, we have a different approach involving public services generally far more, and therefore there will be a different level of arrangements for us in Wales, and we're working with the Ministry of Justice in Wales to make sure that as things move back in-house, in terms of those two arms of probation, there's a well-coordinated arrangement, and police and crime commissioners will be involved in the Ministry of Justice in co-commissioning activities and support agencies. So that's a very much an important issue of reducing reoffending.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair. Could I just very quickly ask you mentioned the apprenticeship levy, Commissioner, earlier on. I try to remember, and you mentioned money coming back. How does that relate to the money we've actually paid in?
Oh, it's a good bit less, but perhaps Darren could give some more clarity there.
No problem, Commissioner. The net, so the gross levy goes up from 4 police forces to the Treasury every year is about £2 million recurrently. So we've had about 1.1 million back in. Part of it offsets 17-18 costs, part of it offsets 18-19 costs. So you can see the degree of the problem. As a minimum, the Commissioner spoke earlier around, there are some green shoots of success coming through in terms of our conversations, but as a minimum, you'd want that £2 million of the levy to come back in.
So we are being substantially shortchanged.
You may well say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Could I just make one observation about, in respect of diversion? The most important thing is that everyone really can. There's a fine line between getting, in circumstances where you can stray into all sorts of problems. But I think one thing that concerns a lot of people is, how can I describe it? Serial criminals, really, that that they got to be dealt with in an appropriate way. Yeah.
No, that's beyond dispute, and the criminal justice system notes that. And that is one of the reasons why I want to review the police and crime plan, to make sure those issues are understood and where we stand is clear on that. What we've been talking about up to now is are not serious criminals. They're people who, for a whole range of reasons, find themselves at the wrong end of the law, but a totally different approach, absolutely, to dealing with serious and organised crime.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. If we can now move on to the performance management presentation. There's a lot of questions going to be raised appertaining to that later on by various members. So if you could move on with that one.
Yes, thank you very much. And we have the slides. I wonder if I could crave your indulgence, Chair. There are two performance reports before us. In that I'm about to give our view of the Q1 of this current financial year and what we've done about that. And then the Chief has his presentation on the outturn report for the last financial year, 17 to 18. Could I suggest that they're taken together? In that when I finished, the Chief then gives his report, and then we take the questions jointly, because you may well find that a number of the issues that you want to put in actually coincide, and also bearing in mind time pressures, it will enable us to get through the reports and to stay for at least a good bit of the rest of the agenda. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Right, there we have the slides, just the introductory slides. Onto the slide? Yes. Yeah, and
Does Larry want to try?
oh, it's here. Is it? Oh, should you do that? Right. If we go to slide 2, this is just a recap on the significant roles that we have here and how we work together in terms of challenge and support. You can see there my key officers, the Chief Executive, Chief Finance Officer, they're the other 2 statutory officers who, like me, have a number of one-to-ones with their engagement. I work on a one-to-one basis with the Chief Constable, the public, and with yourselves in terms of statutory functions. Next one. Now, in terms of the governance structure, just to remind ourselves, we have yourselves, the Police and Crime Panel, who challenge and support me and my office. I meet with the Chief Constable on a one-to-one basis, more or less every week, to raise topical issues that have come to my attention through a range of activities. I have the senior management meetings. They're just starting with a new senior management team, so we've only held our first meeting, and that's one of the reasons why the other 3 main managers, I thought, should come along today to understand the process and for you to meet them. The Strategy and Performance Board, now that is the primary vehicle that I use to hold the Chief Constable and the Chief Officer team to account in terms of delivering the priorities. And that's a meeting. It's not a public meeting, but it's a meeting held in public. So any members of the public are entitled to come along and listen to the proceedings. We then have the Joint Audit Committee, which I've referred to before, and as its title suggests, it looks very much not only at the money, but the ways of working that we have to make sure that they are fit and proper. The Wales Audit Committee attend those meetings. Being alluded to just shortly, we have the Estate Strategy Board, which I chair and the Chief Constable attends, together with other relevant officers, and the Estates Implementation Group, which, in a sense, does the work that the Strategy Board asks it to do in making things a reality on the ground, and it is my deputy who chairs that implementation group, hence her knowledge, particularly of the North Monmouthshire situation. The Strategic Planning Group, we are represented on that, and as the title suggests, that looks to the future. There are various policing boards, which I'm sure the Chief can allude to in due course, and then we have a whole range of themed meetings, such as on 101, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, given the growing public interest in that. And also, of course, we meet with other key agencies, such as the Independent Police Officer, the Independent Police Conduct, what's it?
Independent Office of Police Conduct.
Oh, right, okay, I'll get it right. Okay, if we move on then. Right. What I'm going to do now is move into the Force Quarterly Performance Report. As you see, the parameters around it is the link to the Police and Crime Plan. Part of that is leading to the review of the Police and Crime Plan, and as it says there, it's a snapshot in time. Now, the notes that I'm going to use for this, and in times I'll be quoting directly from them, because they're lifted from the draft minutes of the last Strategy and Performance Board. And I'm doing that for consistency, so that when those minutes are approved, and you'll have the opportunity to see them, there shouldn't be any contradictions between what I'm saying now or misunderstandings, because as far as possible, I'm going to use the same words. So it should be noted that this report, the Force Quarterly Performance Report, and it's the first one in this kind, and I must say a considerable amount of work has gone into it from the policing side, and you have a copy of that report in your papers. It should be noted that it's a snapshot in time and provides the key elements of performance which are coming through the highlight report process. It's worth noting that it is certainly not an exhaustive list of the performance monitored by me and my office. These relate to success measures within my plan, but as I have already mentioned, other areas of concern or good work may come up alongside this performance information, and that is also considered and scrutinised. Challenge and support, indeed. Now, emerging issues can evolve quickly in the work of policing, and that is why I am initiating a review of my police and crime plan to ensure that it is truly reflective of the strategic assessment of demand and the public's requirement from the service. If we move on to 4. Right. I'm going to give a bit of time to this in particular because of the public interest and the media interest in 101, and I know that we've had some correspondence from yourselves on this. The 101 service was considered at the Strategy and Performance Board on the 31st of August, following a media release in relation to abandoned calls, 47,000 in 2017. And you may be aware that I was interviewed on Radio Wales and that we also issued various press statements on this matter. Now, I've been asked what my current view is on the performance and how acceptable it is. I will say that I put on record my concern about the number of dropped calls, but I am very well aware that calls can be dropped for many reasons, and I did my best to articulate that on the media. Now, obviously, those who drop the call due to the time taken to answer are a concern, but it's not really possible to quantify that number. There is a message when people call in, signposting callers to other services if required, for example, environmental health departments for complaints of excessive noise, and indeed local authorities for matters like dog fouling. I will say that we had a controlled experiment yesterday in my office where we phoned 101. It was answered within 4 seconds, not because they thought the call was coming from my office, I stress. Although I did.
Because I answered the phone.
You ran down there.
But that was consistent because prior to my appearing on Good Evening Wales, I phoned from my home, which isn't a number known to the control. And again, it was 4 seconds to get through to Gwent Police. I then had to think of a quick apology to the operator answering the call about why I'd rung and wasting their time. But some people decide now, and we noticed this, to use alternative methods to provide Gwent Police with the information. You did receive, and it's amazing how fast time passes, 12 months ago from Superintendent Ian Roberts, who at the time was in charge of the Force Control Room, that talked about the perfect storm that had occurred as a result of major changes. And indeed that we were moving towards a model where people will be able to access information by other means, such as by social media. Now, we've been engaged with the ongoing review, which came out of that discussion, with and my Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Executive do receive regular updates on performance monitoring and ongoing actions to improve the service. I will say, I'm not too concerned about how many drop off after this period of time or that period of time. What we want to be sure, as far as my office is concerned, is that the service that's being provided is the very best that can be, and that the force are working towards a system where the average call is about a minute. At the moment, it's the average is 2 minutes 14 seconds, although the figures that we have for September show that it's 2 minutes 44 seconds this month, but there could well be significant reasons for that. Now, I have looked, I have asked the Chief Constable to look into other methods for the public to use to contact the police, and that is ongoing, especially if the matter is not an emergency. We've promoted the use of email for some time, and indeed, as I've said, we're going to set up a social media desk, which is due to go live in December. And we've received quite a bit of feedback that many people would prefer to report issues via social media, and this, of course, will allow for this to be done. Another issue being considered is Report My Crime, which will allow members of the public to report and track updates on crimes committed against them online. There is also an ongoing review into the first point of contact service with a full business case going to the Service Improvement Board on, it was last Monday. And maybe at this point, can you comment on what came up at that?
Will do, Commissioner. I think one you've already alluded to, one of the key requirements coming out of that was the social media desk, which is in the report, and the second one about increasing the number of call takers to actually deal with the demand, both which will contribute to reducing 101 time.
All right. Just to draw this particular item to a close, in some police forces, calls are answered immediately, 999 obviously, but 101 as well, and then the call are put on hold. Whereas in Gwent Police, we do aim to connect callers directly to the operator, who will then deal with them, as opposed to asking them to pick up the phone and then ask them to just wait. Through the Deputy Chief Constable, she is drafting a letter that is going to be shared with key stakeholders, such as local councillors and other appropriate individuals, to explain where we are in terms of the 101 service, and we will be able to share that draft letter in due course. Gwent Police staff, when they answer the calls, they try to assess threat, harm, risk, vulnerability, and manage the contact by creating an incident log, meet customers' needs, direct inquiry accordingly. Very important that yourselves as councillors, if you're dealing with 101, remind those who are going to call in to get the log number, so that if they want to follow up with queries, we can do that reasonably straightforward. And we will be doing further work into looking at why some calls are just being dropped, especially the abandoned times. Now, 101 service is becoming far more widely understood and known. And whilst we are looking at ways of reducing it, there is a capacity. We can't employ dozens and dozens more people in the control room. I think it's fair to say we're up to establishment at this time, and we have the best of equipment that is available. So whilst we're working to reduce the time that people have to wait, whether it's by improved technologies or by diverting people, giving them information about more appropriate sources, as its popularity increases, there's going to be that balance. So, I can't give an assurance that in a year's time everything will be faster, because I imagine we could be dealing with far more calls. But those are matters that we're going to look at in detail to see how we can improve matters. Earlier this week in Birmingham, I'm also a member of the Specialist Capabilities Board, which is an England and Wales board that looks, as its title suggests, specialist capability, including IT systems, roads, and the use of force control rooms. And there is work going on a national basis now to see how force control rooms across England and Wales in particular can provide far more support and information for dealing with serious organised crime, as well as not forgetting the local requirements. If we go on to the next slide, please. Now, this is just looking at the areas within the current police and crime plan that we then referred to when we scrutinised the paper that you've had that was headed Force Performance Report 2018-19 for quarter one. And the paper, by the way, that you've been sent is the actual paper that was presented to us. It's not been amended. That was the paper that we looked at, and these are the comments. In terms of crime prevention, the Deputy Chief Constable informed us that crime was increasing nationally and that Gwent was no different, with an increase of 9%, which equated to 7,761 extra crimes. The Deputy Chief Constable stated that the Inspectorate had undertaken their crime recording integrity audit, and in a number of areas we were over-criming, but compliance is now more than 90%. The Deputy informed us that there was a fluctuation from under-reporting to over-reporting, which we need to understand, and that's work that's going on. She also informed us, that's the Deputy Chief Constable, that she was keeping a close eye on violence, robbery and sexual offences. The Deputy informed us that she has discussed at the Criminal Justice Board how to speed up the investigation of historic sexual offences, whether that be progressing to court or reaching the point of decision. The Deputy Chief Constable stated that we had now reached a point where we were understanding crime a lot more than we had. The Deputy Chief Constable stated that she considered robbery and burglary offences as indicators of the types of crime that Gwent Police do not want prevailing. That doesn't mean to say we're not concerned with the other types as well, but those are ones that there is a focus on at this point. She informed us that given the community fear of these types of crimes, there had been some excellent covert and overt policing operations which had led to convictions and was now resulting in a decrease in these types of offences. Now, she said although this was good news, she still wanted to keep a close eye on that and improve matters further. She also stressed that one of the priorities which we fully endorse in my office was the work to be done on domestic abuse, which does remain an absolute priority for the force. The Deputy explained that there were culture clashes due to this standpoint, in that they were conflicting with other priorities of officers, and an increase in arrests had led to increased custody demand. Now, the DCC stated that there was a need to keep a close eye on the management of offenders, especially sex offenders. She went on to explain that Gwent police officers are managing a high number of sex offences, and this is constantly increasing. We were reassured that every force across England and Wales is the same, and this is not therefore restricted to us. Not that that's cold comfort, of course, for those who are impacted by it. She stated that the number of offender managers had been increased, but there remain challenges with risk assessments of offenders. The Deputy stated that 70% of assessments had been completed, but there was a need to look closer at how the management of offenders was impacting communities. She did, however, praise the work of youth offending teams and Gwent police partners who are working hard to provide early intervention programs, which is something we alluded to at the previous panel members. I'm drifting back years at the time. Now, we were informed that by the head of service development, that they've been invited to be a member of the MAPA, which does stand for the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements Strategic Board, in order to provide leadership at chief officer level. I questioned whether the serious and organised crime strategy had affected the figures in the report in any way. It was responded that it wasn't felt that this was necessarily the case, but the way in which we question and support frontline staff may need to improve so that they do understand how they can contribute to the reduction of serious and organised crime. Moving on to victims, the next slide, if I could. Now, the Deputy Chief Constable stressed there was a lot of work to do around victim satisfaction, which had decreased in areas such as hate crime. She informed us that the head of local area policing was chairing a meeting to review the process from reporting to charging for offences where victim satisfaction and public confidence was low. The Deputy reassured us that Gwent Police victim satisfaction for domestic abuse incidents was now more than 90%. I asked what can be done to improve victim satisfaction overall, and the head of local area policing confirmed 8 out of 10 victims are now satisfied with Gwent Police, but the greatest opportunity for Gwent Police was to update victims in a timely manner, and that more work needs to be undertaken to manage expectations with those who contact Gwent Police so that people are aware of what a reasonable response time is, depending upon what service they need from us. Now, I said, and this is my experience from engagement events, that the public are beginning to understand the pressures facing the police service, so managing expectations is now a real opportunity for Gwent Police. Members of my team have acted as critical friends in attending meetings which have been focused on addressing vulnerability, and I've alluded to in my earlier report a number of ways that we're doing that. In recent months, there has been a particular scrutiny of managing of domestic abuse offences and supporting victims, and the Assistant Chief Constable has been leading this work through her Operational Efficiency and Effectiveness Board. Community cohesion. Now, I've raised concerns that public confidence remains low and questioned what will be done in relation to increasing public confidence from an engagement, communications and staff training perspective. Therefore, I have requested an update on UPSI, which stands for the University's Police Science Institute work, and the intended outcomes. And at that meeting, I queried whether incidents of disability hate crime are being adequately managed, and I don't need to repeat what I said earlier in that regard, except an assurance that it will be, although the number of reported offences for disability hate crime was lower than other types of offences. Tackling antisocial behaviour. At the Strategic Performance Board, I asked whether repeat antisocial behaviour was an issue in the same way that repeat offending in general was an issue. And the head of local area policing assured us that these incidents do exist, but they are treated in the same way as a repeat offender. We actually operate a strike process, a bit like baseball, 3 strikes are out, but along with local authorities, before a punitive form of punishment may be introduced. But the force, we are trying not to criminalise people, alluding to one of the questions we had earlier, wherever that is possible to do so. We were assured that the 5 local authorities within Gwent are giving Gwent Police a good service, and that indeed this, of course, as Darren reminded us, was supported by funding for Safer Gwent from my office. Now, there has been a significant decrease in antisocial behaviour, and the Deputy Chief Constable informed us that all community support officers have now been trained in criming antisocial behaviour. Therefore, an increase in antisocial behaviour criming is likely now to occur in order to remedy under-recording in the past. It was added that the increase in public order offences that we have also recorded may be due to them being incorrectly recorded as antisocial behaviour. Then just moving into effective service delivery, and I will be drawing my remarks to, at this stage to a close, Chair, or at least almost. My team has raised with the force that this is the area which requires stronger evidence in relation to the key performance indicators, such as delivery of the investment fund and savings, efficiency savings targets. Now, I am confident that these matters are being given full attention, and I'm sure that Darren can comment later if there are questions on that they're being given full attention within the force governance process, but the evidence of it has been lacking up to now. This is a matter being addressed by my new Head of Strategy and Gwent Police's Head of Strategy, Performance and Change. At the fortnightly meetings between our 2 chief officer teams, we consider the development fund, and this involves scrutinising areas of budget which need investment. Now, it's important to note that Darren Garwood, as my Chief Finance Officer, and Nigel Stevens, the equivalent for the Chief Constable, meet regularly to scrutinise forecast spend for 2018-19 and options to utilise any slippage in delivery of budgeted schemes. This ensures the successful delivery of the Commissioner's and Chief Constable's statement of accounts, and there will be a reference to that in papers later on. They also discuss matters such as medium-term financial projections, the impact of the comprehensive spending review, and the impact of national programmes of work, such as the Emergency Service Network, transition, which is an IT system, and the police ICT company capitalisation and in-year financial performance. The Deputy Chief Constable stated that implementation of the fully integrated resource management system known as FIRMS had been difficult, with considerable issues around the payment of invoices. The Deputy stated the overdue invoices are now down to 1.5 million because of the work undertaken by the Head of Finance and her team, but that this would remain on the risk register until some of these issues have been addressed. Now, although not covered in the performance report, it's worth mentioning that we undertook a complaints file inspection in August covering October 17 to March 18. We dip sample complaints completed by the Professional Standards Department during this period to ensure that they followed the proper procedure. It is not within my remit to comment on the outcome of the complaint, rather just to be satisfied that the proper procedure had been followed. Where we identify an issue of procedure, we of course refer that back to the department for further investigation. And indeed, the satisfactory situation regarding the outcome of complaints was backed up yesterday when the Chief Executive and I met Catherine Evans, who is the Director for Wales of the Independent Office of Police Complaints yesterday, and she was very clear in her praise for the way that we are well ahead of the table in terms of dealing with complaints. We'll now, with your permission, Chair, move into the delivery plan outturn report from the Chief. I can say this was scrutinised at the Strategy and Performance Board, and this is the Chief Constable's evidence of delivery against the Police and Crime Plan for 2017-18. Directly from the minutes, you'll note in due course that the Chief did state that there were large similarities between the organisational performance, which I've just been talking about, and the Force Delivery Plan outturn report. So quite a bit of duplication can be cut out of that, and the Chief did thank very much the head of service development for her considerable work in writing the detailed report. I did stress that in terms of the evidence that we've already flagged up, especially about effective service delivery, that is going to be very helpful as evidence for the comprehensive spending review, so the Home Secretary can have a good understanding of some of the pressures facing policing. And the final point I will mention, we will be talking about the equality report in due course. Both the Chief and I are very keen that in terms of future recruitment, we do try and focus on younger people from economically deprived areas within Gwent, because in terms of diversity, the greatest division, in my view, is not between necessarily those of various ethnic or cultural groups, but is now between what I often describe as the have and have-nots. And it is something that I think policing can play a role in trying to advertise itself as a good career for young people from some of the most financially disadvantaged areas who may not otherwise even consider policing as a future career. I'll leave it there, Chair, and if you could invite the Chief, and then we'll take questions.
You know, obviously there's an overlap, so straight up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you moved off. That was a bit frightening. I must admit that. Larry, you're going to take it forward. Thank you. If I, before you go into it, thanks, Commissioner. And some of it will overlap. There's no doubt about it. If you can, I'll give you a summary straight at the beginning. If you want to give my take on the last year, really. Positives have increased in numbers. Brilliant. There's new energy in the force. We haven't done that for years, and you've got local people working within Gwent. You've got some people who've come outside who add different things, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. We've got, unlike other areas in Wales, we've got 2 fast-track officers. I don't think other people in Wales have got that. It's only a small function. It's only a small part. We go to bigger metropolitan forces, and you know we can match with them. So you look at the quality you have got and the people that serve your public, I think is absolutely fantastic. If we look at national recognition, hate crime, what we've done with mental health and what we've done with some parts of custody is absolutely fantastic. That's the positive work. If you look at the negative, I'd say the demand, although we can also take that as positive. We can paint that any way we want. More people are confident, more people want to report. But of course, if we went from 1,450 officers to 1,150 officers, back to 11,279, our demand has increased by approximately 8,000. So with retirements, you haven't got a huge amount more people to deal with that. And it's actually increased by 19%. But that's negative and positive. And possibly the most disappointing part for me and for the rest of the force was to have HMIC look at us and say we weren't quite up to the grade on domestic abuse. With the history of the force, I think that's something we take really, really personally. And it's something now our officers are really feeling the strain on. They do a huge amount of work with domestic abuse. We've gone back to a team in one area. We've realised now some victimless prosecutions, which we've spoken about before, but never had. So when a victim doesn't want to report and go through and go to court, we actually do that with a body-worn videos. So I think we got there in a very, very short space of time. And I would hope HMIC, when they come in next July, will see that improvement. So that's a quick summary, and I'll go through the slides then and take questions after. That's, I don't know if you've seen that wheel. A lot of forces use it to explain demand. Did anyone see the old one 2 years ago? It's a dramatic uplift. If you look at the bottom, it says 131 crimes a day. When I first came to the force in 2014, that was 100, and sometimes not reaching 100. We take 210 999 calls on average. We have 522 incidents on average per day. So that's 999 calls, about 10. And they can go from a minute to an hour to deal with, dependent on the state of the victim, dependent on what's going on, dependent on even longer, of course. If you look at the majority of crimes, up to 131, violent crime accounts for 39 of that a day. A very, very personal crime in whatever nature it is. Domestic abuse stands at 31 a day. 18 of those are crimed. And again, they're extremely complex, involve partner organisations and involve various methods of disposal. Not always the best being getting an individual to Crown Court. So it's a very, very difficult and emotive crime to deal with. And our officers do struggle with that on occasions, no doubt about that. Other areas of demand, missing persons. I think you've got on there 16 missing persons a day, which take on average 9.5 hours. And that's what I said at the beginning. Really, do we work as a partnership very well? I think we do work as a partnership very well with many of our partners. But a lot of what our officers deal with, they didn't envisage doing that when they joined. They didn't envisage looking for the same person all the time. And that is a massive demand on resources. And if you go to the top left as we look, mental health, 13 incidents a day, and which are related to mental health, which really impacts on our capacity. But again, I think we've had massive success, if you can call it that, this year in the way in which we provide the service to the public and also reduce demand on our officers. If you move on, Larry, thank you. Crimes increased by 19% from last year. That is approximately 8,000 crimes, I'd say 40, I think it's about 41,032 to about 48,870, something of that nature. So you've got 8,000 crimes extra we're dealing with. It's quite strange the level of incidents has stayed the same. That is because we record more. And looking back to a question was mentioned that people want us to deal with the more hardened criminal and the more serious criminal. Of course we do. But there is a huge demand out there to record everything. Is that the right thing to do? I don't think so at all. I'm sure the public would say, do you need to record a minor altercation that was on CCTV when no one's hurt, where someone's rung in? Is that going to benefit anyone? Public would probably say no, but we do. That has got to be investigated. That has got to be dealt with, and that takes officers and staff time. But that's the place we live in at the moment. So we do record. So reasons for crime going up, ethical crime recorded, and which is outstanding. And I don't know, those of you who listened to the radio before today about what's going on in America last night and the sexual offences, issues, etc., etc. People are much happier and confident to report because the people who are dealing with those issues are much, much more sensitive and much more experienced, and I've got technical expertise, hopefully, to deal with those issues. Snapshot of what offences have gone up. Biggest one, the biggest category is violence without injury. I think the figures, and you've got the performance report, it'll probably be about 7,200. Violence with injury up to about 9,800, I would think. Probably haven't got them exact, but it's about 2,500 rise. Violence with injury is anything from common assault, actual bodily harm, cyberbullying, internet-related offences, which are not sexual, of course. Those come in different categories. But that is why that offence has increased so dramatically. People want to report those issues. We will record those issues, and the cyber element has entered that. It's really pleasing that people are happy to report sexual offences. Some of those are historical. And I can assure you, if I paint a picture of our CID and public protection resources, they are right up to the limit to what they are dealing with, historical and current offences. You'll all be aware that over the last few months, we've had the murders. They take a huge amount of staff with the individuals to be dealt with. They've got to be dealt with appropriately, not only community-wise, but also investigative-wise, and that then detracts away from historical offences being dealt with. Public confidence, being mentioned earlier. I personally always struggle a bit with this, because if you look at it, these are the Crime Survey of England and Wales findings. It's a survey that's conducted once a year. I've got to be honest, I don't know how representative the sample is. I think in our area it's probably a few hundred or 1,000 perhaps. I don't know the exact amount. But if you look at quite strange findings, they've always been to be quite strange findings, because it shows that the public are more confident in what we're doing. They're more confident that we treat them in a fairer manner. We are more reliable, but yet we understand the community less. So I struggle with those details. We have got work to do on community confidence, there's no doubt about it. I think in this area of Wales, ourselves and South Wales struggle on the figures front. I think we've got a hugely supportive community, and I think the detail to be looked at more closely is our victim satisfaction figures. Although again, those are only the people that are surveyed. So we have got issues, and we work with that with our own surveys, etc. And we're doing work with the University of Police Science Institute as to how we can impact on that. And I've got no doubt that social media will be one of the impact factors on that. Although if you do look nationally, we've got one of the most positive social media footprints in the country, certainly in Wales and certainly in England and Wales. I won't go through all of these. Ones that we're all exceptionally proud of, because I know you've been to some of the events yourselves. Positive futures, anything that will impact upon sport in young people is a good thing and motivates and builds their morale. That is an excellent scheme which takes place in Gwent. Mini police, absolutely fantastic, first in Wales. The sooner we can roll that out to the majority of our schools, the better. And we've got individuals doing that, and I know they're coming out to all parts of the county. Police cadets, we've really benefited from having a really loyal police cadet scheme due to some of the people who are volunteers who've developed that. And special constables, although we've reduced the total number of special constables we have, there's recruitment of an extra 20. We've now got, I don't know if one of you saw him outside, Kyle, he works for Monmouthshire. He's one of our special inspectors. Esther used to work as a nurse. They're two special inspectors, and they work with Gareth Chapman as the chief exec of Merthyr, who's our specials commandant or specials chief officer. And they now are really getting to grips and deploying those individuals in a much better manner. The disappointing thing with that, of course, is many of them go on to join the regular police force, which is a positive in relation to they require less training, they understand the business, but of course we lose our special constable cohort very, very quickly. And again, I mentioned Twitter, Instagram, etc. IOM has been mentioned, a key part of what we do, targeting significant individuals within the criminal fraternity. YOS, 85% reduction, doesn't need to say anymore. Wisdom, tackling the more serious individuals. What I'd like to concentrate on here is the bottom two, Pollitt Police Online Investigation Team, it is so successful with us that the level of sex offenders has risen dramatically within our areas. I don't think it's any different to any other force in the UK. That puts a real strain on our staff in relation to risk assessment. We changed the way we risk manage these people within the country in recent years. They now do what's called an arms risk assessment, which takes a lot longer. But I can assure you, our most serious MAPA offenders are scrutinised extremely positively, as are the others. But that is rising and likely to rise in the future. Serious and organised crime. 18 mapped organised crime groups. That is throughout the county. I think in Gwent, unfortunately, we're positioned with our road network, which comes in at both the north and the south of the county. Our proximity to Bristol, our proximity to Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and London, easy access, and certain parts of the county attract individuals who deal in Class A drugs, firearms. I think that's going to move more into human trafficking, child sexual exploitation. There are parts of it now, but certainly there are serious issues and concerns with county lines throughout Wales and most definitely in Gwent. A significant part of Operation Tarian, which is the regional organised crime group throughout South Wales, Dyfed and Gwent, 80% within Gwent at the moment, I would suggest, which is extremely positive for us. But again, you look at the issues we have going on within the area. Those of you who are keen on watching the media and will see what's going on within the area, Operation Jewel, which extremely positive. We managed to corral 350 officers to conduct a number of warrants. Operation Finch is on there, probably the largest scale and longest operation we've ever taken place in Gwent Police is still ongoing. And a number of OCG people have been imprisoned as a result of that. We've had people come from Merseyside, the National Police Chief Council, Serious and Organised Crime Lead, to review what we're doing. He is very positive and we'll be inspected on this next year. We're launching Operation Jigsaw, which is our revised strategy in relation to serious and organised crime. And we've been chosen as one of 5 pilot sites to have a serious and organised crime coordinator, which we hope will assist within the Newport area with bringing partnership groups together. Because a key challenge, it was mentioned earlier as well about partners, is getting across to people. This is a partnership problem, serious and organised crime, gang networks, and it's not just Class A drugs, it's small gang-related activity, thefts of bikes, theft from person, minor robberies which aren't armed robberies, and getting across to individuals that this is everyone's responsibility. And we hope to be able to do that. Great, Larry. Just some of the technology that we're using. Ones that I'd want to comment on are body-worn cameras. We're issuing them to every police officer. I think they'll be by November. We made the decision, I think 3 years ago, to issue them just to stations. That hasn't been the best impact. It's worked quite well, but it'll work better when every officer has them and takes responsibility for them. We're launching a programme towards the end of the year, Triple F programme, where every officer will have laptops being piloted in Newport initially. That will hopefully ensure people are out more and they can update their incidents when they're out with laptops, take statements, etc. But as you know yourself, that will be hugely cultural, getting people to adapt to that. And again, the younger officer will probably take that much easier than the older officer, but that will come, and it's a real progress. 999i, I don't know whether Ian explained that when he came here a year ago. That's something we've got in the control room, which will allow contact between reporting person and police officer. We don't know whether that's got any legs, I've got to be honest with you, because of the cost of it and also because of what the victim's getting out of it. So, that's early days, and I don't think any force has taken that on at the moment. Cheers, Larry. Supporting victims, on to the next part of Commissioner's plan. Again, that slide speaks for itself. Increase in reportings of hidden crime over the last 12 months. Huge amount of victims in really sensitive cases. The figures are on this page. What really concerns me is domestic abuse, 9,228 incidents, 52% of which are crimes, 8% increase, 13% increase in high-risk domestic abuse. And I said what concerns me is possibly not, probably strange, not the high-risk domestic abuse, because I know we provide such a huge wraparound service to that we generally arrest the person, deal with them in the appropriate manner. It's the medium and standard risk, which will possibly not be perceived as a threat. And our officers and staff are so attuned to that now, it creates a huge amount of demand for them. Cyberbullying and harassment, gone up by 40%, and cyber exploitation with revenge porn, sexting, etc. So daily business now, and our officers are being trained for it. Again, sexual offences have been spoken about. Missing children, what's good, look at the bottom of the slide, reduction in the multiple repeat missing episodes. Commissioner mentioned Sir Tom Windsor came to visit the force, and we fortunately spent a bit of time with our missing children's team. Always a bit of, I think, a lack of clarity from our own partnership groups as to whether this works or not. I think we're convinced that it does work. Certainly Tom Windsor was convinced that it does work, and he actually gave the comments that that's the best child protection presentation he has had in all his visits to other parts of the country. And that, you know, hats off, and that is a truly partnership operation, local authority, health, voluntary organisations, police, and it's one which we are determined to keep and should keep and hopefully roll throughout Wales, which I know the Commissioner and the team, and I know we in the force are very proud of. Human trafficking, modern day slavery, they're the figures, but we had the figures for the last 3 months, about a month ago, and within Gwent, we, out of all the referrals, and that is from South Wales Police, Dyfed Powys Police, North Wales Police, Barnardos, New Pathways, Samaritans, Bowser, we had more referrals in Gwent than all those put together. And hopefully that illustrates to you the impact that a small team has had. It's an extremely difficult piece of work. We can't get anyone before the courts at the moment. I think that's the next step, to prosecute people. But we're uncovering victims, we're dealing with people appropriately and getting them into the national system so they can be rehoused. And I think the officers and staff really need to be commended, and undoubtedly they're the best in Wales and up there in England and Wales. Mental health, mentioned it earlier. Again, if you just look at the table, the increase in the figures is there to be plainly seen. If you look at the bottom right, we were asked as OPCC and a force to make a decision earlier in the year. 4 forces were asked to make a decision. Huge demand in relation to mental health. How can we help our officers in dealing with this issue? How can we help the person that is in a critical need at that time? We made a decision to employ 5 mental health practitioners and a supervisor within the control room. The success of that is plain to see. If you can look at police deployment averted, 840 incidents have been averted. And that will get bigger. As you can see, it's got bigger throughout time. How many people arrested for Section 136 Mental Health Act following consultation with them? You can see that's been halved. And the amount of mental health logs, that is a massive success. And I think, Commissioner, I don't think everyone was convinced that that would be a success at that time. But again, we've had to pay for it. Is it our job? No. But it deals with the person who's in critical need much better and reduces the demand on our staff. So we did it. 101. I haven't got it in my presentation, but I want to mention it because it covers some of this area. If we go back to historically what 101 was, it was launched in 101 House in Cardiff Gate. I was in South Wales Police at the time. It was a partnership initiative between Cardiff Council and South Wales Police, and it was a partnership non-emergency number. Of course, it is no longer now a partnership non-emergency number. It is a police non-emergency number. And I think the difficulty with it is, yes, if you ring a number and have to wait a significant period of time, you're not happy, as in many other areas of people's lives. If you came into a police station and had to wait 2 minutes, 44 seconds to get an answer, you'd probably be satisfied. But if you ring the phone and have to wait 2 minutes, 44 seconds, you're not satisfied. But you'd be happy if you dealt with someone in person. So it's got to be remembered, it's a non-emergency number. Some people do hang up and ring 999. Some people do hang up and ring other organisations, which they should do anyway. And it's difficult to evaluate around the country because we deal, first person answers, deal with that query. In other forces, switchboard, 2 seconds, got your call, hang on, music in the background. So it's difficult to evaluate. It is an area we're looking at. It is an area that concerns us. I'll check whether the letter has gone out from the DEP, because I'm going to write to everyone, and MPs and Assembly members as well, just to explain the situation with 101 and what we're actually doing. Social media desk, upskilling staff, and the numbers of staff as well. So I'm going to write out. Victim satisfaction. A bit of a mixed bag. What we're really positive about is victim satisfaction in relation to hate crime. I know the Commissioner mentioned earlier, but it's actually an extremely positive picture in that, apart from disability, which has dropped off a bit, but we're working hard with that, and we've got members of the Independent Advisory Group who are really assisting us. What is disappointing is our victims of burglary and victims of vehicle crime aren't as happy as they were. Victims of vehicle crime, that doesn't surprise me because we very rarely attend that anymore. We don't, that's one of the areas we screen out, if you want to call it that, or we can't solve, etc. We will attend it if there's a need to. Victims of burglary is something we're working on hard to get better at. And the key area is, as you can see, the next slide, is being kept informed. It is being, quite simply, as you would, as I would, there's no excuse. If someone has reported a matter, they want to be kept informed. We've got a CARES programme in place. We're quite religious as to what we do with it, but it's quite clear it's unacceptable in certain cases. It has dropped off, and we accept that. We've got a group looking at it under the ACC and the Deputy, and we hope that increases. It should increase. Antisocial behaviour victim satisfaction. It's a big surprise to me that this is a lot better than crime satisfaction, because, of course, we put a significant higher number of resources into crime, but I think that paints the picture that whereas you would have dealt with certain issues at the beginning of the year as antisocial behaviour, you now record them as crime. So that shows the changing pattern. Community cohesion, third area of the Commissioner's plan. I'll allow you to read the slide. 10 forces were inspected earlier in the year by HMIC. It's what's called a thematic inspection. There is no doubt, I don't know if anyone's seen the report, there is no doubt that Gwent Police was the best at dealing with hate crime. We were singled out in a number of areas for having the best policies in place. We had a multi-agency forum to deal with high-risk hate crime support officers, and our cyber CSO was seen to be extremely successful. That's something we're really proud of. A number of other forces are approaching us now to identify what we're doing. An extremely positive inspection. Internally, we've increased our BME officer representation to 2.5%. We'd rather it probably at about 4%. Gwent, as a diverse population, is about 4%. Newport stands at 10%. Whether we'll get there, I don't know. I don't think we will probably. Definitely won't get to 10%, but whether we'll get to 4%. We've got 20 members of staff who represent as white non-British, and you can see it on the screen. Commissioner, we both go to, and Deputy Commissioner goes to passing out, as you do. You can see the amount of people there. It's really pleasing to see the amount of BME representation there, but we can always do more. And I can assure you, as you can see by the positive action, we are doing a huge amount. Welsh language, I'll leave it, it's going to be spoken about later, part in the agenda. Antisocial behaviour, I think that just illustrates the level of crimes that we're now recording. It was antisocial behaviour before, but it's now crime related, probably public order, violence without injury. That's a very simple explanation when that's gone down. I don't think antisocial behaviour is lessened in any way at all. I think it's just recorded in another area. And the powers we use, we've got dispersal powers, the issues we've used in Newport recently, criminal behaviour orders, and again, out-of-state strategies in there to deal with it. Youth offending team spoken about it. We have an 85% reduction, which is really, really pleasing indeed in this partnership work. Again, I think everyone has had this slide earlier. Really pleased with this. This is the efficiency part of the HMIC inspection. And what's key about that, we have a clear set of priorities. Prioritises investment. I think if you look at, and it's one of the latest slides, our digital services division, so collaboration with South Wales Police, it's noted as probably one of the most successful in England and Wales. And we're really fortunate now. We struggled for a long time really to get our foot in the camp as Gwent into South Wales. We've now got a superintendent down there, which really does give us real strength in that collaboration. And you can see it's really impacting upon, or will impact upon, the rollout of our mobile devices. Again, look at point 3, comprehensive understanding full range of demand. That is very, very difficult. To be honest, we can't crystal ball gaze what is going to be the future. It is, of course, going to be vulnerability. It is, of course, going to be cyber. But people are going to still burgle houses. They're still going to fight after they have a number of pints International Day. There's still going to be nasty people out there who are going to front up to others. So there's going to be a whole mix. And it is about trying to stop that, educate, reform individuals, and also enforce it when you need to. And the next slide is what we've done to try and deal with that efficiency issue, which is change management team, staying ahead team is extremely strong. Commissioner's spoken about the governance structure. Force management statements, I don't think it's getting away from it. It's a huge amount of work. It's a huge, I've had to put a chief superintendent on the force management statements, dealing with that. That is her job, dealing with that, getting that right. I think we've had positive feedback. It has allowed us to identify weaknesses, which is good. And we'll have to identify what happens in the second round of force management statements, which we will submit in April next year prior to getting inspected. Joint Response Unit, winners of the Ferrers Award, National Special Constables Award, Gareth Owen, an extremely positive group of people. And the other areas, which I'll just touch on one area. Well-being of staff, I think, has to be a priority. Has to be a priority for me. With a set of figures that was presented to you. I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before. Gwent and South Wales are the highest levels in relation to anxiety. Don't really know why that is. But I think it's something, it could be related to our community confidence, what people feel like in this area. I don't know. You know, I policed South Wales and Gwent all my life. I don't know, we're bottom in community confidence and anxiety, and that's South Wales and Gwent. A massive priority for me is well-being of staff. And I hope now with the issues that were taking place are really impacting on that. We've got a well-being officer, so I would hope that really is a long-term investment. And those are some of our collaborative departments. I'll touch on one, really. Again, I've spoken about it. Digital Services Division, absolutely fantastic. We're really flying high in England and Wales. Joint Firearms Unit, Joint Scientific Investigative Unit. I think that will probably morph maybe into an all-Wales unit, so it'll be interesting how that moves forward. And we've already spoken about that. If you move on to the last one, Larry. But I think the picture painted there is we lost more than anyone else. So we had some ground to gain, and we've eventually gained that, and we will. Commissioner is working with myself to maintain that, and I'm sure all the staff that serve the public in Gwent are reassured that that is happening. Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Okay, what I'm going to say is not exactly a question, it's an observation really, and it's all about communication, which is not very good in the private or the public sector, in that it's not telling people what you do. And can I say I was in the presence of Detective Chief Superintendent Warrinder the other day, and there were some retired police officers there as well, and he relayed what the police officers do now. Some of these police officers had only retired in the last 5 or 10 years, and they were absolutely flabbergasted. The point I'm making is that the public out there don't really realise what the police do well. They don't realise what local government do half the time, you know. It's all about communication, but, you know, that's an observation.
May I respond to that, Chair? I take your point absolutely. And one of the, and he may wish to comment, one of the key tasks we've given to Rodriguez, our new head of communication and engagement, is to beef that side of things up, and he'll work collaboratively with the central communications from the chief side, because you're absolutely right. It's not only the issue of knowing what we do, it's making sure that it's not just seen as the police being reactive in the sense of a crime's happened and therefore we've dealt with it, but the proactive work to try and prevent crime and develop community cohesion. With your permission, maybe Rodri would like just to say a few words of how he sees that.
Yeah, no problem. I think with the comprehensive spending review coming up, there's a great onus on us to really sell the story and tell people what we're doing and why we're important. I don't think that that ethos is limited just to policing either. I think all public sector needs to do that, and I think using the PSBs, I think, and working together, we can tell those tell the stories and flag up the good work that the public sector is doing, and not just policing. And I think we're all going to be working together in the coming years now to sell those stories, because we've got less and less money, and people still need services delivered to them.
My one question was previously answered. It was because we've got an extra 150 officers. I still have concerns regarding the 101 of how many crimes are now going unrecorded, because when you talk to people on the street, they say, what's the point in phoning 101 because you can't get any answer? Then others have said, you know, oh, I was on the phone waiting ages and I ended up printing it down because the person had shot off. The police were not going to catch him now. And I find it quite frustrating what we have of residents then in the street, and these figures are significantly high. And over the years, we've had assurances after assurances that these changes and that changes are being made. And we're still at this point now with 47,000 drop calls in 1 year. I'd like, if we could have as a panel, more info on the social media desks. I think that will be a very good help in, you know, a different form of reporting crime as well. So if we could have that information.
Yeah, can I just confirm, we'd be happy to give that information. And I think these figures are probably what we thought may happen because they're the 2017 figures. So we would very much expect to see from the police force by the time we get the 2018 figures that those improvements which were introduced a year ago start to be reflected. Yeah. But we will share whatever we have about the future developments when we have them.
Thank you.
Can I just make another observation? I'm completely amazed now, and I circulate around a lot of people. Surprised the number of people still don't realise if it's a serious crime, they ring 999. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think at the Strategy and Performance Board, one of the actions the Commissioner has asked the Chief Constable and his team to take, it goes back to your point about communication, is making sure that we have an awareness-raising campaign to enable people to understand the difference between 101 and 999, and making sure that members of the public are dialing 999 when they need that immediate response. And also to highlight the other numbers people need to be ringing if it's not a police matter. But it's certainly an area that we know that we need to continuously develop. I'd also like to issue an invitation. I suppose, again, it's an open invitation to any member of the panel who wants to come and see the force control room in operation, and to meet with Superintendent Vicky Townsend, who's now taken over Superintendent Roberts' lead role in really understanding and for her to really demonstrate how much work is done in continuously trying to improve the service. But it's something that we're not complacent about.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning again. There's been a little more adverse press release regarding domestic abuse. If I remember rightly, it was 3% was quoted as being being used with the special order you've got. Yet you say that 31 of those crimes, 31 of those incidents, 18 were actual crimes. Could you, through the describe what this particular order is and why it's only been used 3% of the times when the indication is it could have been used more?
I think you're on about domestic violence prevention order, is it?
Crime
That's
prevention,
it. Yeah. On occasions it can be used. Yeah, it's got authorised at a certain level. I think we're very positive. We use it a lot more now. Different in two parts of the force. In the west of the force, what we would call the west of the force, which is going to be Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly, etc. And the east of the force. West of the force, we're piloting a team at the moment, a dedicated group of officers. That's where we've had our victimless prosecutions, and we've seen greater success in the use of the order. The eastern part of the force, which is Monmouth, Newport, etc., is learning from that. But, we're very much aware of it, and we do use every tool at our disposal in relation to domestic abuse. We do use everything, I can assure you.
Could I just add, on the particular point, I too heard the broadcast yesterday morning, and I know that I then raised the matter for more information, because I wasn't aware of the particular case till that point, but I know that the Deputy Chief Constable is now looking into the history of this issue, and I'll be updated as to what happened on that occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Community confidence in policing. The majority of the public actually never come into contact with serious crime. However, they do come into contact with low priority crimes such as antisocial behaviour. And in Newport, I know that we're working towards curing that now, or addressing that. But however, we have a long way to go. And you see the antisocial behaviour going on in Newport Centre and in Newport bus station has a huge amount of people witnessing it. And as soon as they see nothing immediately being done about the antisocial behaviour, the confidence in the policing will drop. So I just think that we need to deal with it. The boys riding around on the bikes in the bus stations, hanging onto the buses, hanging on the back of the buses, which they still do with their masks and their hoods on, needs to be dealt with in a serious, quick manner, because then you will improve the public confidence.
Yes, I'll pick that up. It's totally no problem at all. Yes, there is an issue in Newport. I'd say if I can just, I missed it out in my presentation really, and this is it won't make you any happier, but if we look at areas of busyness within Gwent, certainly Torfaen, then Newport East, then Newport West, then Blaenau Gwent, then Caerphilly, then Monmouth, then Newport. Newport city centre is our by far less amount of calls than anyone else. But because it's Newport city centre, and as I can fully understand, same as Cardiff and Swansea, it attracts a huge amount of publicity. Very much aware, you've obviously met John Davis, the inspector, and Ian Roberts. They put a huge amount of effort into what goes on in the city centre. We have given 8 extra members of staff to Newport city centre, and they've been taken from other areas of the county to deal with those issues. We think we've had a positive response. We don't think on occasions that has been portrayed positively within the media, and that is something for us to do. But we're very aware of that, and it is an ongoing issue which we have to deal with, and it relates, totally agree with you, a lot of people fortunately will never come upon the police, and long may that continue. But any issue, no matter how minor the antisocial behaviour, will make people feel more anxious, certainly make me feel more anxious if I was out and about, and it's something we've got to continually concentrate on. That's not lost on us, and that is one of the inspector's key roles. And I can understand on occasions where we take resources elsewhere, deal with other issues, It's a decision that I've got to make, and I'll stand by it.
It's not that I'm unhappy or happy or I won't be happy. It's about you speak about raising public confidence in the police, and unfortunately they don't get the same level of presentations that we get, so they don't fully understand the same level of work. But what they do understand is youths on bikes riding round, masked up, hoods up, intimidating, knocking over, pushing people to one side. Now, that should be the only way to crack this is by dealing with the issue in a very strong way. You must arrest. Don't worry about being afraid and putting them before the magistrates, put them before the magistrates. I'm not particularly, these people make the decision and they must end up realising that there is a consequence for their action. They cannot go on intimidating the people of Newport or the people of South Wales. It cannot go on. You can crack this quite easily by being there and dealing with those that you're confronted with, taking them back and due processing them. Because then your confidence will go up, because unfortunately these acts of antisocial behaviour or criminality, even though it's low profile, is being viewed by the vast majority of the chatting public of Newport. That's the problem.
It's just to reassure you, Mr. Routley, I'm sure my officers and staff would have no problems with arresting anyone if there's evidence there. I think it's a much wider problem, which is not just policing, as I mentioned before. And I can assure you, if there's evidence to arrest people, we'll arrest them. What happens to them before they go before the court, that's not within my power to decide. But I can assure you, we've put extra staff within the area, and we will concentrate and deal with that appropriately.
If I could just come in, I would just echo the Chief Constable's remarks about the importance of appropriate policing and making sure that we intervene and take action where action is required. I think the other element that I would like to also say is it links really back to the work around adverse childhood experiences and the importance of actually having a preventative way of working. And that's why Gwent Police is actively taking every opportunity, Gwent the very much championed by the PCC, to work with children and young people in schools, children and young people who are out of schools, for instance, within the Positive Futures work, to try and engage them in understanding their role in society and to really look at citizenship and respect and how we work across our public services with young people.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points on the data. The 47,000 calls dropped, does that relate to the calendar year 2017? Or what period does that relate to?
That was the media figures, yes.
So for what period does it relate to? Because we've referred to 2017. Now, is that April 2017 to March 18, or is that the calendar year 2017? Okay, if you could just clarify, that for us.
They just said 2017 and then 47,000.
Can you use your mics? Can you use your mics, please?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, if we can just check that, and then at least we'll know if we've got a half-year picture that we can start to look at to see what the performance has been.
If it's helpful, I've got the press release here. Not our press release, sorry, the press statement, where they use both. South Wales Police being answered within fell from 93% in 2013-14 to just under 60% in 17-18, and then calls to Gwent Police fell from 83% to 54% between, well, it says between 2013 and 17. So we'll try and get that more accurately for you. And I'm sure Rodri is listening to that point, and we'll sort it.
If you could just clarify that, and then at least we can see then a half-year position to see how that performance is changing. just quickly then, on slides 11 and 12 of the Chief Constable, we're talking about the year 2017-18, but the figures provided were just for April 17 to January 18. So are the rises actually higher, or are you comparing to a part year to a full year?
Okay, sorry, let me get back to my presentation. What slide does that relate to?
Slide 11 and 12, the supporting victims.
Okay, so it's in relation, and it goes, it's April to January.
Right, what happened to February and March?
Okay, sorry, if you let me get back, I'll get back on.
Are you comparing 10 months of one year to 10 months of another year, or are you comparing 10 months of 17-18 to the whole of 16-17?
No problem, okay. Can I follow that question?
If you could just clarify that's fine, just so that we can understand the full year picture, if that is a part year. Thank you. So in terms of my questions then, I understand from the clarification that we've talked about today that serious organised crime covers a number of categories in the report that was provided as background papers. That, as well as hate crime, it is not actually identified in the figures because they cover various categories. So how are you able to understand the position with serious organised crime and hate crime, for example, and to ensure that the trend is going the right way, and to ensure that you're able to review that position and liaison with the Chief Constable to say what are the issues and how are they going forward? Because we can't see them from these figures. So how are you able to view that?
We will look at the overall figures from year to year. We also engage with a whole range, far more than we used to now, of groups that work in the areas of, I'll deal with the hate crime. I'm sure that the Chief can deal perhaps a little bit better with the serious organised crime side, because the criteria and the categories have changed. So there's a range of evidence that we'll gather in terms of monitoring the not just the issues of satisfaction, but the occurrences of hate crime. We have certainly issued statements urging people to report more issues, so we can expect the figures to rise. So I don't think it's that easy to compare figures year from year, because we are driving the reporting of it. So I don't know if we can add any more to that.
All I was going to suggest is if there are questions that the panel want answering in relation to detail of the statistics, perhaps we can have those sent through to us, and we can ensure that we get the correct statistical answers for you, rather than us trying to necessarily answer without the accurate information in front of us. But I do think in relation to the categories of crime, and then making sure we consistently map those, I think there is obviously there's the tracking of data that we do, and that certainly myself and Sian, the Chief Executive, sit on the Assistant Chief Constable's performance meeting, where we scrutinise performance in relation to both serious and organised crime, hate crime, on a monthly basis, and that there are thematic ways of delivering that. But I think providing the greater clarity of the categories of recording, we will follow that up for you. I don't know, Chief, if you want to.
Could I just add before we do that?
Add in there? My question was not for you to explain to me what the serious organised crime figures were. My question is, from those figures that are provided in a force report, I did raise questions before, those questions were answered. It's not about that. My question is, if they're not visible to us, do you have methods and ways of being able to identify that? And what is the Commissioner's Office doing? I fully expect that the Chief Constable would have that information available. My question is, as the Commissioner's Office, how are you ensuring that you've got visibility of that information, and how are you ensuring then that the resources are targeted appropriately? I only use serious organised crime and hate as an example, because it's not, you don't get the visibility from the information you've provided.
No, I can provide reassurance that we would have detail of hate crimes, but I think, as the explanation was, is that serious and organised crime, perhaps we should phrase it differently, because it's perpetrated by serious and organised crime gangs, for example, as opposed to a definition of the crime itself. So any crime could be, that any crime could be classified in that way. It's all about the perpetrator. So we do at the sort of levels below Strategy and Performance Board have the individual board meetings where we discuss the sort of some more in-depth detail. So hate crime would be one, for example, that would be a separate report in relation to, and I think we get that 6 monthly in relation to numbers of hate crimes and what crimes are involved. But serious and organised crime is a slightly different matter because it covers everything. So it's something that perhaps at this stage there's more anecdotal evidence of it, but it's something that with all of the effort that we're putting in, we should have going forward far more detail of and better ways of quantifying that to be able to share it more widely.
Could I just add, I see the Chief wants to come in, but could I just add to that? Look, I think it's very important, and the point made by Jill is right, that we provide you with the information in a form that is usable and useful to you. I hope you'll agree that what we've done so far does reflect an awful lot of work at the same time as many other things are happening. Could I ask you, the Secretary, through you, Chair, if perhaps the Secretary, following on from this meeting, could write to me with suggested future requirements so that we can make sure that these types of issues, to the very best of our ability, are reflected in future reports?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. The Chief wants to come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just clarify on that point? We have provided that information, and that template on which we would like that information, that was provided in September 2017. You have given us assurances that that information would be taken on board. I made it quite clear that there was a measure, how you're going to deliver it, and if you can't deliver it, what's the method for making sure you can deliver it, and the baseline. That information has been provided and requested on a number of occasions. I don't think that request has changed, and yet we're still in a position where we have 36 measures, 22 of which are quantitative, 14 are narrative. It's about the diversionary schemes. And this isn't about criticising the good work that's going on. We know there is an awful lot of work going on. We're covering this. But there are 22 measures that talk about the effectiveness, about how people are confident, how people feel safe. They are quantifiable, and they're in your plan that you have set, that's what you're going to deliver. Of those 22, from the presentation we've had today and from the background papers you've sent us, only 9 have a method identified. And of those 9, only 6 actually have any baseline data to support them. So, you know, from our point of view as a panel, we have provided information about how you can better deliver it and how you can better deliver an illustration to us about how it's being achieved. We've created a performance subgroup. I have personally put time in and met with your officers. Peter and John have made up the performance panel. So at what point are we actually going to see these assurances delivered?
Well, the last point, I believe we are giving you assurances, clearly not in a form that's convenient for you. But look, let me make this clear. We will certainly look back now at all previous submissions that we've been given in regard to this. It would still be helpful if we could perhaps have a comprehensive statement from via the Secretariat on where they think, drawing our attention to previous submissions that have been given to us. Off the top of my head, I can't recall the 2017 requests, but we'll need to look back at that, and we will look back at that. But if we can have it in a coherent form now, with this fixed in my memory, that would be very, very helpful. We could be perhaps incorrectly thinking that all the strides that we've done to now have addressed those things, and it's clearly not the case. But I can also remind you that in terms of the accessibility, the objectives that we have and how they're to be measured, that is something that's going to change. And I've said that I am going to review the plan, mainly because of the change of the nature of crime and its impact on communities, but then using that opportunity to make sure that the required outcomes, the measures, are written in a way that also will enable the generation of tangible evidence. So I think there's a number of things happening, but certainly we'll look back at that. There is definitely no attempt to mislead or to suppress or in any way to ignore any request made previously. But if we could have that up again, we'll do our very best to incorporate that to the required standard.
Could I just make an observation that the most important issue about this is the people of Gwent, isn't it, really? Yeah. It's all about that. And can I say that we have made some strides. There's, some work to be done, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact it's all about the people of Gwent and we represent them. Anything else you want to say now?
I will just clarify the point. It's disappointing that given that was provided over a year ago and on a number of occasions, and if there was any misunderstanding or any information that was required about that, I have regularly made myself available via telephone conference and a meeting. That information has been provided in a template. It's not provided to my satisfaction. It's clearly, there's a measure, how are you going to deliver against it? So, for example, if you were going to take repeat offending, and particularly youth offenders, which is one of your key, either number 6 or number 9, two of your measures, it would be a case of how am I dealing with it? What's the measure I'm going to use? The number of repeat offenders or wherever it may be. The frustration is that this information is available. I know it's there. It's used for day-to-day management in the police. So it's just about finding your source and using that as a reliable source. And the frustrating thing for me will be that if we see a new plan coming out that suddenly drops all this information because it's too difficult to collect, that will be extremely frustrating. So I'll close my questions there. I don't think there's any point in me asking further questions, but to be clear, that information has been made available on a number of occasions, and it's disappointing that we are where we are.
I'll ask Sean to update us on what's happening, but yes, I'm disappointed at Jill's comments. I have to say there is definitely no question of rewriting objectives to make them easier or to not provide meaningful information. That's not the issue. And look, we're making great strides to try and improve the matters. But as you say, Chair, our overall and overwhelming responsibility is about the police service of Gwent, and to provide that support to the communities and individuals of Gwent, and that's very much a partnership approach. I don't want to say any more on that, but I know that Sean has some points to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to, suppose, reiterate that this is partly, the review is partly a solution to this issue. So a piece of work that Joe Robinson as Head of Strategy is doing with the Head of Service Development at the moment is making sure that we do have those measures. I think the Commissioner said in his presentation earlier on that we are very much assured that the force is doing all of this work, and we just need to be able to evidence that to yourselves and to the public, and that's the message that we're trying to sort of work on between us and Gwent Police, is how we actually evidence those things and how that performance report can cover that in future, because I completely understand where some of it is qualitative when it needs to be quantitative, for example, and that's the sort of the conversation we're having at the moment, is how we can get that right. And I can just absolutely give my commitment that any review will make that, is intended absolutely to make it easier for yourselves and the public to be able to follow from the priority level right through down to the individual work of people within Gwent Police, and be able to follow that back and forth, and that the governance structure within Gwent Police and our sort of monitoring of that is all going to be geared towards providing that information. But I think we would all acknowledge that it hasn't been in the past. So that's something we do need to work on.
Would we say now that the message is received and understood from all parties?
Thanks, Chair. We know the figures aren't everything, but they are very important, and Mr. Williams did give us a lot of figures as a background to your presentation. But I think there was there was a hope, if not an expectation, that some more information would be given to this meeting. So I've got a couple of other things, but what is the timescale of actually getting this information to the panel? Could I just clarify that? Well, the information that Jill has been...
Well, as the Chief Executive has outlined, a member of the management team is tasked with doing that work. I trust we can show clear steps towards that by our next meeting. But also in terms of the new plan, these things will have to coincide because we don't want to start... We don't want to present you with information that then will become meaningless because there are new objectives set in the new plan. So it'll be work in progress in that sense. But we will certainly be working as fast as we can now. With all the work that's been done, I want to get it right. I want to get it right. So I would certainly trust that by our next meeting, we will have information that's more satisfactory in terms of figures.
Yeah, thanks for bearing in mind that we're told the figures are there in the background. I was hoping that maybe something could be got out sooner rather than later.
Well, look, but, if we can do that, we'll circulate it.
Oh, okay. Could I just cover a couple more points? I mean, there's a huge amount of information there. So obviously, it's not possible to cover all of it. It's the issue of updating victims. I mean, I recall this from a number of years back that it was one of the issues of sort of dissatisfaction with policing, that people were not being updated, and I suppose it's disappointing to learn that that is still a situation. I do appreciate the amount of pressure and the amount of good work that is being done, but it does have a huge impact on the confidence of the public in what the police are doing. I think we all, sorry, I meant to say we all obviously welcome the increase in numbers, but as you said, that's going to replace the big hole that was that's been created in the past 3 or 4 years. Missing persons, I think we were told it was 9.5 hours on average taken on these things. Again, I think some of us will recall that the previous chief did a lot of work on this, and I think we thought, well, I'm sure there is a better way of dealing with this than there used to be, but are there still ways of improving that process so that, well, it was all, if I recall correctly, it was all about people, often youngsters, not going missing so often. It's not the time taken to find them when they do. It's obviously preventative work to stop them going missing as often as they do, and I think we've had figures before where, you know, some individuals just went missing umpteen times, just on a very regular basis. I think I would agree with this over-recording. If there is an incident which the people involved in the incident think no more of it, what's the point in recording something if people have forgotten it half an hour later? I mean, it seems a bit mad, really. But I'll leave it at that for the moment, Chair. But I don't know whether anyone wants to maybe come back on a couple of those points.
Yes, I could. Ms. Howells, just on one point. Sorry, you confused me earlier just about the timings. It is April or January. It is about the same time last year, definitely. They're matched again. April, January, that's what the sporting victims, April, January last year. It's definitely that one. It's against the same 9 months. Same 9 months. And yes, where are that we still collate? We have got those figures, but we collate them and bring them back to you. Definitely. But again, the same, just to reassure everyone, the picture won't have changed. Domestic abuse has risen, serious sexual offence has risen, etc., etc. It won't have changed in relation to those details, but I do take the point it is in relation to last year, definitely. Yeah, I think you've answered your own question there. If you look at slide number 11, reduction in multiple repeat missing episodes. In fairness, the previous chief, he really drove the missing children's team, and that is really successful. We're still getting a lot of missing people. So you may get younger people. There's a reduction in repeat missing, but we still get that level of missing people.
So we're talking about Sorry, are we talking about the numbers going missing, or
You-
there's also the numbers going missing and the numbers of an individual, the number of times an individual goes missing?
Yeah, if you can see at the bottom of slide 10, it's reduction in multiple repeat missing episodes. So we've got a reduction, say for myself, I've gone down from 12 to 9. But we still get the issue. It's very much an issue of, and I didn't mention in there about, I just said, we've got a huge amount of episodes of missing persons. I've mentioned the rise or the fall. It's just a fall in multiple missing episodes. So the missing children's team is very, very successful, but the amount of time our officers spend on locating people is significant. And I don't think we'll ever lose that, because officers and staff will always consider the risk to themselves of if they don't find someone and what happens, etc. They will always find, and you won't get rid of that.
Okay.
Does that explain? I hope I have.
Yeah, I
It's
think
the missing
so.
children.
It was it was a number of times a person went missing, and
It's there.
there's progress on that.
And it's the bottom of slide 11, and that's young people.
It seems
young
there are
people.
lots of people still inclined to go missing.
Yeah, that's young people. That's young people. It's the reduction in that.
Okay, we move on to the equality plan. Peter, you've got a question.
Actually, I'm going to talk about it, but you mentioned the 248 women who have now been diverted from custody through the Women's Pathfinder scheme. Actually, it's similar to what Jill was talking about. It's just a bland statement. First of all, of those 248 women, are they first-time offenders?
That's not under equality, is it?
Is that 248?
And that's been dealt with.
Has been running in Gwent or not? It was shown to reduce the rearrest rate from 25 to 18%. Where? In Gwent, are we talking? And how do you measure that? Sorry. And
it's in the next report.
yeah, I am on page 31. That's what I'm talking about. And
Are we talking the
you
former
mentioned
performers?
Pathfinder earlier.
Can I just
You're onto the clock.
Can I just clarify, because we got a time factor?
Yeah.
What I moved on straight away to the equality plan.
Okay.
And asked Peter had a question to ask. It's 20 past 12 now.
Yes. The chief and I will have to leave for in a few minutes, but like to hear what this question is, and then it can be dealt.
So as I say, it was on page 31. It was talking about the Pathfinder scheme, and it was just to try and, as Jill had mentioned before, more detail as to how that is, how you've come to those figures, etc. You know, there was that 248 women over what time period? Is that 1 year, 2 year? Because it certainly won't be this year's, because you wouldn't be able to say that it would reduce rearrest rates, because you wouldn't know if they've reoffended over. I would say reoffending rates would come up after maybe 24 months, not a year.
I suspect that since the original Pathfinder Committee creation, probably about 2015-16 financial year, but we'll certainly provide that clarity.
But I think the illustration is well made. So I think that's the point, and we will follow that through. And I think that is a helpful illustration in relation to a need to have some rigour in how we approach report writing to ensure that there are, the points that have been made previously, that comparators are and timescales are very clearly indicated.
So we understand the good work that's going on and over what period of time and how successful it's continuing to be. I think it's very important.
But still on page 31, in fact, it's the item above that, the mental health, which is a big issue for all of us. Again, it appears to be good news that it's gone from 42 down to 11%. 42 in 2014. Is that a proportion of the number of people arrested altogether, or I wasn't quite sure what the percentage represented?
interactions where, the amount of mental health interactions that we'll have in relation to a person, whereas 42% would have been arrested before, 11% have been arrested now.
That is good news then.
As I've said in my presentation, the mental health work is really good news, which is something we should celebrate. We're leading in Wales and certain parts of England and Wales. And I hope the figures have portrayed that. It's reduced demand significantly, but more importantly, it's helping people out in crisis. And they're not ending up in cells. It's really, really helping people out.
So they are being diverted to more appropriate places.
I would hope so, but they're not ending up in cells. I know that.
I mean, that's a very fair point, is where are they? And it's something that we look into on a regular basis. Certainly the health board step up to the mark. They've got some facilities in, I think, St Cadog's Hospital. It's, well, I think there is some in us, but there's certainly specialist units in St Cadog's Hospital. And it depends, of course, on the nature of the person that we're dealing about, the crisis that they're in. But there is still far more to do. I know we've been looking at potential third sector partners in terms of the provision of suitable facilities. So it's something that's falling to the police, but it's a broader responsibility for public services. But certainly under the new provisions of the Act, we have managed to reduce, and through the work of the mental health team in the force control room, managed to reduce that number to what it is, or a percentage to what it is.
Just for clarity in relation to that, after 12 months of the mental health practitioners being in custody, there will be an evaluation report which is being done for us by Swansea University, and that will be able to provide us with the exact sort of impacts and the benefits of that unit. Because actually we think that there is only one place of safety other than a police station in Gwent, and that's one bed in St Cadoc's. So what we've done is mainly stop the detentions in the first place, rather than sort of have more places for them to go. So it's working with social services and health to be able to find a better way to deal with somebody in crisis, rather than anybody being detained at all.
With your permission, I think the Chief and I need to withdraw, but I'll leave my colleagues here to deal with the remaining questions.
Can I just make an observation on what we were just discussing? I hope that these other agencies are sort of giving you some commendation for the action you're taking, really, because, I mean, it's a long time since I was involved in an organisation whereby it was, mental health was regarded as, it was a Cinderella, still is in some respects. Any other questions on the equality? I jumped a bit really, but trying to keep it flowing.
Just a comment, Chair, if I can. Again, on page 38, I mean, I think it's probably a huge disappointment to all of us to see the substantial rise in the various types of hate crime over the past couple of years, really. And I'm not asking for an instant answer what you're doing about it, but I mean, the fact it's happening, I think, must be a concern to everyone, really.
I agree with the sentiment of the concern about increases in hate crime incidents, and whilst we will continue to strive to ensure that we both investigate and respond appropriately to hate crime incidents, this actually is an element of good news at the same time, because this is about an increase in the numbers of hate crime incidents that have been reported, and therefore that have also then been able to be dealt with and investigated. So whilst there has been an increase in hate crime, at the same time what is pleasing is that people are having greater confidence in coming forward in relation in particular to racial hate crime and hate crime in relation to LGBT. Our particular concerns, though, are the low levels of reporting in relation to disability hate crime.
I would really... has anyone seen the thematic report, HMIC? No one? That's exactly what you're asking for, Mrs Howells. an independent assessment of how the force is doing. It's not what the Commissioner is doing, but I would urge people to read it, because hopefully it will give you reassurance of, probably not answering your question, the Commissioner is holding me to account, but it's an independent assessment of how the force is doing. I really would say we're the best out of all 10, and you've got some big hitters there. If you read it, we can send it to every member. There's some massive hitters there, forces who you think would be doing better, and we're the best. I think it's something I'm very proud of. It's not my work. There's a lot of good people in the force who are doing it, but it's something we need to be really proud of. As a county, we're dealing with people appropriately. We've got to get the disability bit right, I think, because we're not quite right. But if you look at hate crime, race, religious, we're doing really, really well. And again, it concerns me when we seem to play with the figures sometimes. When they go up, people are more confident. When they go down, we're better at dealing with them. But I think this is, because we play with the figures all the time, we can say that, but I think this is an area whereby we're doing really well, because I think we've got some really talented, celebrated individuals in the force, not just officers but staff, who've received national recognition, and I just hope we can keep hold of them, to be honest with you, together with some of the other quality PCSOs and community officers and response officers we've got. They're top class.
If I can just add to that, every time there's an HMIC FRS report into Gwent Police, the Commissioner writes to the Home Secretary with his views in relation to it, so we can also share that with you. Those are always published on our website, but it may be something that, as a matter of course, we could share, because that's another example of what the Commissioner has done in relation to any either recommendations or commendations from HMIC FRS.
Yeah, can I say, well, thanks very much for that. That's really, really good. And this again, a communication factor, isn't it, really? And everyone knows what's going on. Any other questions on equality? No? We now move on to the Welsh language standards. Colin?
Well, I say there's a lot of good news in there. It was just the and recognising that most jobs Welsh language skills would not be essential, but I'd say they are probably desirable in some places, and it was really, when you advertise, maybe not make it in a condition, but at least saying that you would give people the opportunity to learn the language skills when they were in post. It's not easy. As I said earlier, thousands of people, including myself, have struggled for a long time to do this. But I think the only way you're going to upskill a department in that is to give people the opportunity, really.
If I start and then pass over to Sian. I think the point is eloquently made in terms of the challenge of recruiting Welsh language speakers to Gwent Police, to Gwent OPCC, when we live in the area of demographics of Gwent in itself. But I think we have made great strides. I'm really pleased to be able to report to the panel that we've recruited 2 new members of staff to the Force Control Room who are Welsh language speakers, which is a significant development. And I know that the Human Resources Department holds roadshows with Welsh language medium schools, colleges, to try and promote Gwent Police as an employer of choice for people who speak Welsh. And but alongside our recruitment, and I think you make the point about, obviously we assess every post in relation to the language skill requirements, but there are obviously opportunities to consider Welsh language essential posts as well. But alongside that, we have a learning and development strategy for the Welsh language, which is obviously related to the Welsh language policy. Every member of Gwent OPCC and Gwent Police has to do a minimum induction into the Welsh language, which includes some basic pronunciation, some greetings, making sure that we are able to communicate to Welsh language members of our communities who may wish to communicate with Gwent Police through Welsh, and appropriate mechanisms of how to signpost them. So it is a challenge in terms of how do you develop those skills to to enable people to be able to communicate effectively and comprehensively in Welsh when you're doing it from perhaps an internal learning and development basis. But I do feel that we are encouraging people to learn Welsh within the workplace.
Just to reiterate from my responsibility for the learning development of staff, as Ellery mentioned, that all staff, existing staff, have had the lowest sort of initial level of training, and we've encouraged all staff to go further if they wish, and we're sort of actively pursuing Welsh in the workplace training, because most people have fed back and said that they find that most useful, to have it actually tailored to the work that we do. So that's something that we hopefully next year will be able to report back on successfully.
Anyone else on that? No? Okay, we now move on to Treasury Management.
That was for noting, Chair.
Sorry?
It's for noting. It's for
just for noting, is it? Right, okay. Budget setting timetable.
I'll take this one. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll endeavour to do all the financial briefings in Welsh next year, I think, and it may make a bit more sense, certainly to me. Yeah.
As long as you don't speak, I was going to make a joke there, but I stopped myself. I was going to say,
budget setting timetable presented today for the information, really. It goes to Joint Audit Committee for their consideration and comment, and I present this to members as per previous years. Hopefully the timetable provides you with some assurance around the rigour and scrutiny that the budget setting process goes through. You'll notice on the number of statutory deadlines and the robustness of the approach and the accounting mechanics at the tail end. The meetings within the timetable have been scheduled and certain start dates. And I think the only key point I want to raise today for panel members is the finance subgroup that we've had in previous years. I've put a date in around November time when we start getting more emergent views on provisional settlement, CSR, etc. And importantly, when we would have received the Chief's budget bid for consideration. The initial precept consultation would have started by then, so I'd welcome, after this meeting, any volunteers to sit on that group at a time and location that's mutually convenient for us all, and we can do some of that detailed work as we've done in previous years and have those technical and detailed conversations that will hopefully land us at a sort of a similar page, let's say at precept deliberation time in January. Happy to hold it there. Sorry, Peter, it's in as a TBC at the moment. I believe it's in it's point 24. Yeah, to be confirmed. No. It's somewhere I put it in between the sort of management board and the sort of finance complete in some of the bottom up stuff. So we'll have some really good clarity around what the emergent pressures, etc. And what I aim to do, I think it worked well last year. When we get to the December meeting of this panel, where I share with you the updated medium-term financial projections, you recall, I dovetailed that onto the back of the Chief Constable's presentation, which was bringing to the fore some of the emergent demand and the pressures that the force faces. We'll also have some work then around where the future direction of the police and crime plan is, serious organised crime, cyber criminality, etc. So I think it'll come together. But certainly welcome members to put their names forward and utilise our finance subgroup again.
Yeah, anyone wants to put their name forward, obviously, is important. We have, enough people there to yeah. Okay. So, information is obviously the most important to us all.
So you're happy to take part, Chair?
Okay. Sorry? Yeah, if we make a note of all those names, and the more people involved in that, the most important is finance. It covers everything now, doesn't it? Any questions? Anything clarify with Darren? No? Okay. Move on.
So you'll circulate.
Yeah, the information will be circulated. Make sure that everyone keeps up to date with all their emails and everything. Forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair. Just for members to note, the next meeting will be held on the 14th of December. We've got standing items in terms of performance management, the PCC's update and the initial budget briefing. We've also agreed to have the modern slavery human trafficking team presentation, which is previously on the date to be confirmed. And we have three reports in terms of the panel itself. We have the annual Police and Crime Panel complaints report. And I'm also suggesting I bring forward a review of the panel arrangements and terms of reference and rules of procedure. These haven't been looked at since the panel was established. I'm suggesting we look at them just to check they're appropriate going forward. If members are happy to say, I'll finalise the work programme.
Okay, any queries about that? Anyone want to raise any? Okay. Thank you very much for attending. You know the date of the next meeting. Make sure you read all the information that's sent you, and there's a lot of information. And there'll be some big reports coming from the Chief Constable. Make sure that, we've been offered this, and make sure that we keep ourselves up to date. Thank you very much for attending. Safe journey. Bye.